Ohio State has had some issues so far this year. They do seem to be fixing things. Meanwhile, there are some other Big Ten schools that have had issues this year that seem to be making things worse. What is happening at Michigan right now is almost unbelievable to watch. Yes, they're losing on the field, but there seems to be a lack of competence at the top of the football structure at at Michigan, whether it's with head coach Brady Hoke, whether it's with Dave Brandon, the athletic director. Yes, there are communication problems, obviously. Yes, there are decision-making problems. Are they doing their jobs? It doesn't seem like they are doing their jobs right now. This is a multi-million-dollar operation with hundreds of people under these guys, not just the players, but the football staffers and everybody else involved there. How is Michigan getting this so wrong right now, Ari? Am I overstating this, or we see more things coming out today even? The statement that I mentioned at the start of the show was a 1 a.m. statement released by Dave Brandon, finally checking in on Shane Morris, his injury last week, the way it was handled. They admit he did have a concussion during that game. What is going on at Michigan?
Well, I think the first part is just, the handling. I mean, of course the game is important. Winning and losing is everything at places like Ohio State, Michigan, but just handling your players in the proper way. And I think that there's a debate on whether or not that's magnified based on what Michigan's doing on the field. We'll get to that. But there's a certain responsibility from the adults in the situation, and that's Brady Hoke, that's Dave Brandon, and that's to make sure that the livelihood of their players is in the right hands and doing the right thing with their players. And after that became in question, Michigan just fumbled it all over the place. They haven't addressed it properly. They waited till 1 a.m. to release the statement, and if there was any question whatsoever of whether or not Brady Hoke was in the right or wrong by doing exactly what he did with Shane Morris during that game, they're not doing a very good job of making you feel good about whose hands they're in.
And listen, people make mistakes. People make mistakes. We've made mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. We understand that. And people have good intentions as well. We understand people try their best. But the idea that people make mistakes and the idea that you have good intentions, I mean, some people are sort of like jumping to the idea of don't question Brady Hoke's integrity. I don't think you have to question his integrity. I think Brady Hoke wants to do right by his players. It's a matter of, is he doing right by his players? And is he capable of leading a football team, whether it's related to winning games on Saturday or whether it's related to handling your business and keeping your players safe and doing all those things and handling things afterward, handling adversity? Is he capable of doing that right now, Bill?
I think it's hard to say, frankly, it's hard to say that he is at this point. Before this happened, Michigan, was kind of I don't want to say in shambles, but it was slowly coming off the rails. Maybe not so slowly coming off the rails at Michigan. It's just in terms of the product on the football field. And then this happens, and it's not handled very well at all, as Ari said. So I think you do have to question whether or not Brady Hoke can handle this. And it's not just Brady Hoke and Dave Brandon handle this. It's just it hasn't been dealt with really all that well at this point.
And now people are wondering too, like Dave Brandon puts out the statement. Brady Hoke was sort of hung out to dry with his statement yesterday when he maybe didn't have all the information. Are those guys on the same page? Are people trying to start saving their jobs? Obviously, this is it's a complicated topic. It's a hot topic. Ari, do we have people checking in?
We have people checking in. And I think the question that everybody wants to talk about, not just only one here, is should Michigan's AD, Dave Brandon, be canned? And that's the way he put it. You have the combination of what's happening on the field and what has happened on the field for the past 4 or 5 years now. Then you have these types of issues. Do you feel that his job should be in question, is the question?
I think when you are an AD and you make a hire like Brady Hoke, as Dave Brandon did, you're tying yourself to a coach like that to some extent. You are taking a little bit of a risk. You're not making the easy hire, the obvious hire necessarily. So to some extent, as Brady Hoke goes, so Dave Brandon goes. And again, the idea of that people make mistakes sometimes, how do you handle a crisis? And putting out a statement at 1 a.m. when earlier yesterday Michigan said they would have a statement from their medical staff sometime in the afternoon, it comes out at 1 a.m., that's not handling a crisis. Not having clear communication between the AD and the head coach after something goes wrong in the aftermath of that, that's not handling a crisis. Everybody makes mistakes. What do you do after the mistakes are made? And so I think there are reasonable questions right now, not just about Brady Hoke, but about Dave Brandon as well. Because if you get rid of Brady Hoke, someone's going to have to hire the next coach. Is this the guy you want hiring the next coach with the way he's handling it now? Bill, should his job be in question when it comes to Dave Brandon?
Absolutely. If Brady Hoke's job was in question, then Dave Brandon's job should be in question. Like you said, they're linked. Dave Brandon hired Brady Hoke. Dave Brandon is, in a way, responsible for the product that Brady Hoke puts out on the field, and is also responsible for how the guy he put in charge is handling this crisis, and he's not handling it very well, like I said. So, yeah, I think you have to consider that Dave Brandon's job is in question. I think everybody who is in a position of power, not everybody who's in a position of power, but everyone tied to this situation who's handled it poorly, from Hoke to Brandon to even the medical staff. I mean, we haven't really been able to question them either about what exactly happened when Shane Morris came off the sideline and what those discussions were like. So I think all of them have to be held accountable.
And it does sound like they did not maybe have the structures in place to handle that in the moment. You know, Ari, you asked the question at the start about Dave Brandon's security. What do you think of all this?
I think it's really tough because we were talking about Dave Brandon and whether or not he should be in this situation a week ago. And I think that there's an accumulation of things that are happening, not just what's happening with Shane Morris and the transgressions or whatever that might have happened on Saturday, but the Michigan football program and its direction, has been in question. Last week we talked about Brady Hoke and whether he's the right coach and, compared hires between them and Ohio State, and now all of a sudden you have some of this, which brings us to our next point. Does what is happening on the field at Michigan in terms of their losses magnify this? And I know that we had a little bit of a discussion, but if Michigan was winning, Doug, would this be, swept under the rug? Would it be different? Would it be just as big of a deal? What's your take on that?
I think there's some attitude among some people out there that, winning solves everything, and if Michigan was 5-0 right now, this wouldn't be a big deal. But I think that's a cop-out, and I think that, yes, they are linked, because if you had a coach in place that was running a competent program, that was running a winning program, that was doing things the right way, that you trusted, if Nick Saban had this happen with a player, I think you would say, well, Nick Saban has proven that he is running a competent program at Alabama. That's proven on the field. That's proven in his attention to detail. He can handle this. Brady Hoke, now in his 4th year at Michigan, there are questions about whether he can handle this. That shows on the field with maybe a lack of player development. And I think something like this, in the moment, not getting a guy out of a game who should have been taken out of a game, then putting him back in later, not having structures in place for people to have an eye on injured players, goes to the larger picture. So to say, if he was winning, nobody would care, they're linked. Are you doing your job? And I think right now, if people are questioning Brady Hoke more, it's because maybe he's not doing his job in this aspect with Shane Morris, but he's also not doing his job when it comes to putting a winning product on the field for Michigan.
Yeah, and I agree that they are linked, but I think there is something to the fact that if Michigan was playing better, that maybe this isn't quite as big of an issue as it is. And maybe that is tied more to what you said about if you're running the program right and you're having success on a football field, then these kinds of things are handled better. But I think I don't completely agree. I think that if Michigan is 3-1 right now, I think it's not as much of a firestorm.
So you guys do think if they're winning, you just you put a concussed player back in the game?
No. Here's what I think. I think that if you walk into the post-game interview room against Minnesota and you won 31-14, and your season isn't a complete disaster already, and you're not already on the hot seat, then you say, and then you handle the situation of we misplayed Shane's injury. We should have taken him out after letting him play that extra play. We're handling it. The health of our students and our athletes is the most important thing to us. We did make a mistake for leaving him in the game that should have been more carefully looked at. We'll review the situation. We'll move forward to assure that this doesn't happen again. Michigan isn't a complete disaster off the field. They acknowledge that there might have been a misplay there, and they're winning football games that we're not talking about it on Tuesday or Wednesday the next week.
But do you think it's a coincidence that a program that has had trouble on the field the last couple years now made a mistake with the player situation in the game, and then since then has made mistakes with the communication between the AD and the coach, made mistakes with the public handling of that. Is it a coincidence that that program is also losing, or is it all part of the bigger picture of right now the people in charge at Michigan are not doing a good job?
I remember a few years ago that there was a similar question that never really made it to this big of a story at Michigan State. And this was before they won the Big Ten championship and won the Rose Bowl. If you remember, we covered the game. We were all talking about it in the press box. Mark D'Antonio left William Golston in the game after he had what seemed like a concussion. He took a big hit. I think he was knocked out cold, actually. And he was either stayed in the game or came out of the game, then went right back in the game way before people thought he was ready to do that. Michigan State lost by a point. They weren't a complete disaster like Michigan was. It was an issue for a little bit. It wasn't a national story. Next year, Michigan State wins the Rose Bowl. We've never heard about it again.
Is that partly because people believe Mark D'Antonio was a competent coach running a competent
Potentially,
program?
yeah. And I don't think that I don't disagree with you. I think that accumulation of things, negative things, happen at programs because it's not a coincidence that these things are happening to somebody who's not, so might be over their head. So I think that there's a correlation. I think the difference that we're talking about is whether or not the story is overblown or is as big of a story as a result because of what's happening. So I don't question whether or not it's happening because, you know what I mean? So it's almost like a zit on your face. If it's like you can feel it a little bit, I don't ever get those, by the way.
I cannot believe you brought that up. Go ahead.
No, but seriously, like if you can feel it coming, you know, and it's already, so those are the losses, and then you pick at it, you're pressing, you're trying to win games, you still lose, and the next thing you know, it's completely broken out because I think it's just a accumulation of things. So
can we zoom the camera in on this complexion, by the way? Because I will say, I still sometimes
actually have a blemish.
I'm 41 and I still get a zit from time to time. Ari brought up in the car today that the ladies tell him he has a beautiful complexion. Is that right? That people say you have a beautiful complexion?
They say facts.
So when you talk about your zit analogy, then you have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, I actually had one. I made one just so that it would make sense.
Just to make your point in the
Yeah.
show.
It wasn't a zit. It was a blemish. There's a difference. I don't get zits.
Sometimes I don't know. I have gray hair and zits still sometimes. Like I can't believe that those things are happening at the same time.
I use face lotion. Do you ever?
I don't use face lotion.
I put lotion on my face to ensure that when I'm as old as you, I look
every
good.
day.
Yeah, speaking about going off the rails as related, we are the Michigan football program right now on this show.
Yeah, sorry.
We could talk about Michigan's problems all day, and maybe people would like us to do that because it is fascinating right now. How this is going to turn out is fascinating because Michigan A should win more than it's winning, and Michigan B, a great university, a great football program. I mean, you can love Ohio State for the fans out there who do, and not dispute that Michigan is a great university and a great football program. They got to be better than this. You've got to handle this.